people. And like, he was like, John, if you don't post this tomorrow, I don't want anything to do with this because this is attached to my name and I don't want my name messing up. And so I was like, I guess, right? And so
Right.
the next day, I reached out to the other two people and see if they were available, which they were. And then later that day, I made an announcement. And so I think I actually waited the day after, but I still made the announcement and
Yep.
ended up figuring it out and figured out how to reach out to sponsors. So we had a couple sponsors chip in so we could get some pizza. And he ended up getting 15 people in person for my very first event on 2 weeks' notice that I never did before.
Nice.
So for me, that felt like the world because if it wasn't for that push, I definitely would have either procrastinated or punked out.
Sure. Yeah.
Welcome to the Audacious Living Podcast, hosted by my man, Audley Stevenson, the Odd Man. He'll unpack wisdom and insights from a cross-section of top quality performers in business, media, sports, entertainment, and lifestyle to uncover key elements to help you live your best audacious life ever. So without further ado, here is the Odd Man.
Greetings and salutations, folks. It's Audley Stevenson back for another edition of the most audacious podcast you'll find on the internet. This, of course, is the Audacious Living Podcast, and I appreciate you for being here as we continue our ongoing goal of helping our listeners live their best audacious lives ever. I can't say how much I appreciate you taking time out of your busy day to spend it here with us. As always, I encourage you to follow us on our social media channels. Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook are our friends under the handle The Audacious Pod. Or if you are on YouTube or watching this episode on YouTube, then you know you can tap the notification bell down below. Ding, ding, ding. And that way you're connected to all great things Audacious related. Now, we've been highlighting the BOLD framework over the course of the last few episodes, and we've reached the final installment, if you will. If you've been following along, you know, the BOLD framework is something that I use as part of my speaking work that is used to help audiences understand what being audacious is all about. It's a 4-letter acronym that spells out BOLD, so better than yesterday, outlast adversity, live your truth, and disrupt the norm. And so on this episode of we'll be touching on that letter D, which of course represents disrupt the norm. And, you know, disruptions, you know, are these things that rattle us. They push us out of our comfort zone. They can throw us into a tangent and sometimes even scare us. But it's precisely these disruptions that allow us to not only simply progress, but to leap forward. You know, if you think about it, you know, disruptions are truly necessary. You know, the light bulb was a disruption. You know, the notion of the earth being round was a disruption. Things like the steam engine, you know, the Steve Jobs and the Apple computer were all disruptions. You know, imagine living today without any of these ideas that were deemed disruptions. As long as, you know, there's creative thinking and minds that are out there that are thinking of new possibilities, there will be disruption. And instead of fearing it, we need to embrace it, cultivate it, and make space for it to grow. You know, John Mendez is a young man who embraces this philosophy and understands what disrupting the norm is all about. And I'm pleased to have him join me on this edition of the Audacious Living Podcast. He's got no problem disrupting the norm and forging his own path and creating his own lane, whether it be through his real estate ventures, his role as a social media consultant, or even a podcaster. You're going to have an opportunity to hear all about John and the great work that he's been doing and really how he's been finding his own way. And that's coming up next on the Audacious Living Podcast. Enjoy. Hey, John, man, thank you for hanging out with me here on the Audacious Living Podcast. As I was saying off the top, it's so mad cool when people want to come and hang out and chat, and I enjoy these conversations and appreciate you being here, man.
Yeah, I mean, I thank you for the opportunity, and I appreciate you, allowing me to hop on, just have this conversation with you today. I mean, as a fellow podcaster myself, it's
No.
these conversations, it's we get to another level, and it's not something that you just come across and talk to someone in the street about, or sometimes it's not the type of conversation you can even talk to your friends about. You usually get a lot more in depth and talk about some really good stuff.
Yeah, no, I hear you, and we'll get you. I was gonna say I'll get you a chance to talk about your podcast, but you do a bunch of things. So it's not just you're not just a podcaster, whether it be in realtoring or I mean, how about this? How about this? I can go through your resume and I can go through your bio, but let's get you to sort of talk about so a couple of things too. What you do, right? Your area of specialty, and what kind of brought you to where you what brought you to where you're at now.
So, like for me, to make it as simple as possible, right? I'm the host of the Walk to Wealth podcast, right? It took me a while to realize that, it's, mile wide, inch deep, or inch wide, mile deep. And I'm a very creative person. So I was trying to do a lot of things. As I said, I'm a licensed real estate agent in the state of Connecticut, man. I'm doing that a little over a year now. I started a social media marketing agency a couple months ago. And I also still work part-time. So I'm juggling a lot of different things, trying to get it going, getting into the entrepreneurial space. And then it wasn't until literally I don't know when this was releasing, but December of 2022, right? Until like this month that we're recording, that I really realized that I need to get in focus and be a lot more intentional in 2023, so that I make this upcoming year something that's magical, something that's big. And I'm planning a lot more things now, and it feels a lot more liberating that I don't have all these extra titles and taglines, and I'm just gonna go by this. So one of the host of the Walk to Wealth podcast. That's it. But as I said, I am a licensed realtor. If you need help finding a house, I can connect you to the right person. And you need some social media tips, I got some stuff there too for you. But that's really it, man.
And so the part I like about that, and I really appreciate, is the whole idea of just going out and trying stuff, doing stuff, right? Like I'm sure a lot of the things that you're doing, it was like it sort of came to you sort of as a thought or an idea, or maybe it was a suggestion, and you're like, hey, let's give it a shot. And why that resonates with me is, the whole theme of this podcast is talking about audaciousness and trying and being bold and taking risks. And that's very much in line with that, because before, and I'll let you comment on this, but before you try anything new, there's always that inkling of like, I'm not sure, but I'll try it anyways.
Yeah, definitely. And for me, for example, I just hosted my very first in-person podcast event.
Okay.
Literally 2 days ago from the day we're recording. And that I can talk in front of people, it's no issue. But I never hosted an event, never did any hosted like a gathering where people get together. That's not in my wheelhouse, right? I'll talk in front of a stage if it's already put together. Sure. But doing the putting together, right? I never did that. And it sometimes it takes a little bit of a push. I got on a call with a guy that I interviewed at my podcast a while ago. I also interviewed him in person, and he hosts events. He's doing like some conference right now in person. He's trying to get like 250 people. And that's pretty big to me in my eyes, right? Because he also lives in my hometown. So it's like that. Not only is that big, but he's also like here where I live. Usually there's no one in your hometown that's doing something that you want to do. You have to reach out to people across the country or find someone in some networking meetup somewhere or at a conference. But he's like, yo, he's doing what I want to do kind of in my own city. Like, let me reach out to this guy. I get on the phone with him, and I kid you not, I just wanted to ask for some advice. I didn't have any plans in terms of hosting an event, but I just want to get some ideas with him. And next thing you know, he was like, yo, John, what are you doing 2 weeks from now? Are you free Wednesday evening? I was like, yeah. He was like, okay. And next thing you know, by the end of the phone call, he texts me a photo, and it's a Canva flyer with like his face and two other people. And like, he was like, John, if you don't post this tomorrow, I don't want anything to do with this, because this is attached to my name and I don't want my name messing up. And so I was like, I guess, right? And so the next day I reached out to the other two people and see if they were available, which they were. And then later that day I made an announcement. And so I think I actually waited the day after, but I still made the announcement and ended up figuring it out and figured out how to reach out to sponsors. So we had a couple sponsors chip in so we could get some pizza, and he ended up getting 15 people in person for my very first event on 2 weeks notice that I never did before. Nice. So for me, that felt like the world, because if it wasn't for that push, I definitely would have either procrastinated or punked out.
Sure. Yeah. And sometimes that push can be so important, right? And when we're watching again, because you get that feeling where you're just not sure. Maybe we've never done it before. Maybe we're afraid. Maybe we don't know. And well, oftentimes we don't know how it'll turn out, and that's enough for some people not to proceed. But the fact that you did, that's a good thing. That's a great thing, actually. Congrats.
Yeah. I have a bunch of those stories, even for like the podcast. I procrastinated 4 months because I couldn't think of a name. It started off as an idea from me, from one of the guys. I would always just hop on FaceTime with him, just talk about life and goals and things we wanted to accomplish. And I was at that time in pursuit of my real estate license. So I was doing about like working 70 hours between two of the jobs that I had and studying to get my real estate license. And it was around that summer period. He was about to go back to college. I was about to get licensed.
Yep.
So our schedules weren't going to match up anymore. And then from there, I just kept writing in my journal. My goal for the week is think of a name. And next, the end of the week came about every week. And I just the same thing. I didn't have nothing. So I just kept on going until one day it finally popped into my head after months of procrastinating and doing absolutely nothing.
Right. So the podcast was ready to go. Everything was set. You just didn't know what to call it.
No. I had nothing set, and I didn't start because I couldn't think of a name. So I waited to start anything because I couldn't think of a name. The only thing I had is some equipment, just because like I would always hop on Zoom calls, so I already kind of had like a webcam.
Sure.
And I knew I had the idea for it. So then I ended up getting a mic prior to me doing anything. But in terms of like planning and episodes, any of that stuff, I didn't get into the weeds with any of that stuff because I couldn't think of a name.
Right. And it's so funny because, if you think of the name, not that the name isn't a big deal, but it shouldn't be enough to stop you from doing anything else. But we sometimes put up these barriers. Well, hey, I can't do this because I don't have the name, so I guess I can't do nothing. And you're like, really?
Yeah, exactly. There's another story too. Like, I have a bunch of these stories, but
Nice.
My first time hosting a social media class.
Okay.
Like, I almost fumbled that opportunity terribly because for me, it was during the beginning of 2021 it was beginning of this year, end of 2021.
Yep.
And so I'm in this mastermind group with a bunch of other realtors. This is when real estate was my main priority. And I was convinced that I was going to be, the top real estate agent in Connecticut before I started focusing on the podcast. And so I'm in this mastermind group. I'm always in the gym. It's from 6:30 to 7 a.m. I'm always in the gym at that time, right? So I'm always working out. And as you probably know, like at the gym, there's always a bunch of noise and background music and people making awkward grunts and stuff like that. So, trying to speak on a Zoom call it isn't the best idea at the gym, right? So I was like, damn, I got some good ideas and I want to share it, but I can't. So I just went in the Facebook group that they had and just typed up the quick little tips that I had on social media. And mind you, I'm not a guru by any stretch of the imagination. I got a lot more experience now, but at that point in time, I never really used social media effectively or strategically for anything. I just posted it once in a blue moon, for a holiday or two. And so one of the moderators of the call was also a top agent in Boston, was like, John, do you mind teaching a class on this? I was like, instead of saying, yeah, of course, I was like, I never taught a class before. And she could have then said right there, she could have said, okay. But instead she said, John, let us know when you want to schedule it. And I was like, I can't say no to a top agent, right? I can't, I got to get it. I got to figure it out somehow. I probably spent more time that class figuring out how to use MailChimp than I did actually like preparing for the class. Like I didn't know anything about hosting a Zoom call or hosting a class or doing anything like that online. And it got to the point where I didn't even know how to send, emails. So I had to manually send the emails to everyone. I had like over 440 signups. So I was just manually sending these emails to all these different people. It was a mess, but it ended up working out. And it took that, someone saying like, hey, you got to do it. Right. Well, she didn't say that, but she told us.
She might as well have said that. That's what it sounded like,
right? Yeah. And so like, I was like, okay, let me just go figure it out.
Right. And sometimes, the idea of listening to others, it can be a good thing. I mean, you got to be careful how much we choose to listen. We don't absorb with, what others say, but certainly when someone says, I see this in you, or you have this potential, it's worth listening to because they've got a vantage point of us that we don't necessarily see fully, and they can see the whole big picture. And we sometimes have a limited view of ourselves. And so I always say, when you hear from people and they give you a suggestion, pay attention, right? And see, because they could be onto something.
Yeah, and like another thing too, the person who says he doesn't care what other people think is is a fool, right? It's
Mm.
not that you shouldn't care what they think. Like, it's just that you shouldn't let how they think of you affect you. But you
Right.
should care what other people think, right? Because there's always usually some truth behind it, right? There's some type of merit,
Based
some
on
type of
something,
thing,
yeah.
right? And you get to the bottom of that. And that just makes you more aware. Could they be hating? Of course. But at least know why they're hating and see, oh, and that's why they might have interpreted that this way or that way. It wasn't my intention, right? But that's how it came off to some people. I wasn't even thinking like that. I didn't even know it could be interpreted like that or something like that. So it's like, it's always good to kind of be aware, but definitely don't get into the weeds of looking into bad reviews and the bad comments, because that'll lead you astray real quick. So make sure you surround yourself with good people that are
You
supporting and
do.
uplifting. But always hear sometimes. I mean, I'll check in what's the other side saying, right? Because there's always a little something there you could learn and
Yeah.
so it's good to stay aware of both sides a little bit.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with it. I think you take with a grain of salt and understand that you're going to get, in that negative feedback, you still may get something that could be of use that you can use to better yourself. So to say you don't care or you don't want to see it, I understand why, but you also have to understand there is some value. So I get it loud and clear. It makes sense.
Yeah, and another thing too, like some people are just fueled by negativity as well, right? Some people, right? Because energy can't be created or destroyed, it only can be like transformed, right? Is the laws of physics or whatever, right? And so it's like, how do you transform that into something that's like maybe might be like I'll prove you wrong, or I'll show him or I'll show her, right? And try it, at the very least, to convert that into something good. But don't, as I said, don't let it consume you, don't let it swallow you.
Yes. Got to be careful. You got to be super, super careful. So, John, tell me then, what was a dream for little Johnny growing up? What did he want to be? What did he want to do? It wasn't all the things that you're doing now, or was it?
Yeah,
You tell me.
no, not at all. So I wasn't even an entrepreneur at all. Like that wasn't when I didn't have a paper route. I wasn't selling lemonade. I wasn't, I wasn't selling, rubber bracelets at school or whatever else you could sell at school. I didn't have the candy bar selling the $1 chocolates. I
Yeah.
wasn't doing any of that stuff,
Okay.
right?
Okay.
I really didn't know what I wanted to do. I can't remember what I really wanted to be. I didn't have a lot of people say I want to be a firefighter or astronaut or something. I don't know what I really wanted to do, for the most part. And I don't really have any memory of there's not really anything that I can really remember like saying, yeah, I want to be that when I grow up. But one thing I did do growing up is I had a very interesting mindset because my grandparents raised me.
Okay.
I won't get too into the weeds of my backstory, but like my grandparents raised me, right? My mother, me and her never had the best relationship. My father was pretty much absent until like a couple years ago. And so, I grew up in a project, so I have a lot of interesting perspectives. And my grandparents they only speak Spanish. They're both Dominican, right? My
Yep.
Dominican side of the family raised me. It's like they weren't really my role models or anything. And when I used to be in school, they would ask, who's your role model? I used to write my grandmother just to have someone to write, so I didn't leave it
Right.
blank. In all actuality, I didn't really have anyone I could really look up to. So I don't think I had something that I really wanted to be because I had no one to look up to. But one thing that allowed me to do is be open-minded. Because
Yes.
I went around living and it was like I don't have a role model, so I'll just take the best of this person and leave out some of the negativity, and I'll take the best of that person over there and leave out the negativity. And I just kind of became this melting pot of different perspectives and viewpoints, and I was trying to like aggregate the best of that I saw within all these people that were crossed my life, and somehow combine that with my own experience that I was living in, and kind of just form like a overall like a super mindset, a super person kind of essentially,
Right.
best of everyone. And that's kind of how went about moving around. So I don't really know what I really wanted to be, but that's kind of how I navigated myself throughout my life. And it wasn't until I'd say, I know in high school, I knew that I wanted to retire by 40.
Okay.
And I don't know really why, what that number was or what made
what
me
it represents.
Yeah, it sounded cool, honestly. I knew I didn't want to retire at 65, but it wasn't until I read Rich Dad Poor Dad in college. And so my sophomore year of college, it was during the pandemic, November, it was fall 2020, right? Pandemic took over the world. And I don't know what, led me to walking into Barnes and Noble, but I did. And I picked up 3 books. It was Rich Dad Poor Dad, Index Funds for Dummies, and a book called I Will Teach You to Be Rich.
Okay.
And I read Rich Dad Poor Dad first. And that book, it isn't the greatest book that ever lived, but it shifted my mindset just enough to realize that there's another way of viewing the world out there that I wasn't learning in school.
Yes.
And then from there, once the winter break happened, I was hooked. And so I started YouTube University, but I had YouTube University on double speed, right? So I'm churning through videos. I'm consuming all personal finance content,
Love it.
podcasts, books, everything. And then by the time I got back to school that spring of 2021, mind you, I only went to school to network and learn how to live my own, right?
Right.
And so I was in the School of Business over at UConn. And then that spring semester, it's like once I saw the light, it's like I can't walk around my eyes closed anymore. Right? I seen that there's another way out there. Now I'm back in school, and it's like I'm learning stuff that's absolutely useless in general education courses.
Yes.
After I just spent all this time learning about personal finance and investing and building credit and all this stuff that actually matters in my life.
The stuff they weren't teaching in school.
Yeah. And so it's like from there, I was just like, and at that point in time too, I tried to get into wholesaling for real estate. I had an attorney that told me like, hey, you can't do that in Connecticut, even though you can. Make sure you check with your state though before you run around and take my advice. But in Connecticut, you can. And then it was I think February 2021 when I decided, screw school, I'm getting into real estate, and didn't look back.
Wow, that's a big leap. Your family, how'd they feel about it?
They didn't like it. They didn't like it at all.
I kind of knew the answer. I just wanted to hear it.
Yeah, they did not like it at all. Especially as I said, it's something about, I don't know, the immigrant community that ties the pinnacle of success to getting a degree.
Right.
It really it doesn't make sense in my mind. Like for example, I was talking to a guy the other day, and he's a year younger than me, and he's making over six figures. Like low six figures, and he's a year younger than me. He has a chess business over here, and like in he's a couple towns over, but like he was like, yeah, like he's in UConn as well. It was just kind of coincidental, but and like, yeah, I don't want to finish, man. I was like, why don't you just leave? He's like, my parents, like, I gotta make them proud. Yes. Making six figures at 20, like, what are you doing, man?
Yeah, what are you doing?
Like, but I understand too. It's also different cultures as well. But like for me, it was at a point where it's like, you got to live for yourself, right? And if people don't, right, and if they can't see that what I got going on is for the best, right? It's like you already had your chance to live, and you can't dictate how I live mine, right? I'm on a different mission. I'm on a different path, right? My mission isn't meant to satisfy you, and so like for me, I just didn't care, honestly. I just told him I dropped out, and it's like my grades were great. I had a 3.78 when I was at school, but it's like, as I said, once I realized that I could learn all this other stuff, I was like, yeah, I can't go back, man. I gotta figure it out. Yeah. And then it wasn't until a while though that my grandparents, especially my grandfather, he would say like slick comments, especially once I got licensed as a real estate agent, because as you know, in the entrepreneurial world and in real estate as well, it takes a while to get things going. Yeah. And so he didn't see the fruits of my efforts, right? And the fruits of my labor. And so he always think like licenciado, right? The licensed guy. And like, but he'll say with like some very sly, very sarcastic undertone. And it's like, it wasn't until a while that he finally started to respect and see what I had something going on. Sure. But for me, the whole time, back to what you said earlier, it's like, I didn't really care, honestly. Because as I said, I knew where my head was at. I knew where I was. Yeah. Not really. I didn't know where I was going really, but I knew it was for better.
Yes,
I
that's
knew
right.
It was for better. So that gave me the confidence and the ability to be comfortable within my own decision making.
Well, John, sometimes, and I would say most times, we don't know where the end result will exactly be, right? We might want it to go a certain way. We might think it might go a certain way. Maybe all the clues are telling us that, but at the end of the day, there's no guarantee. And so when we don't take action because we don't know what's going to happen, we'll never take action because we'll never know what's always going to happen, right? And so I think, and it kind of goes back to why it's important to still take that first step, because you never know.
Yeah, definitely. And for me, it's like, I was convinced, like you talked to me, if we had this podcast a year back, I was convinced that by now I would be the top agent, rookie of the year, selling the most houses ever. And that's not what happened at all. And it took me a while to realize, but as I said earlier, when you first started, like if you try to, put your mind to do different tasks in different areas, like social media, real estate, all the other stuff, like it's like at some point in time, you're going to realize that you're not focused, you're not making actual progress, you're just kind of running around in circles, and because you're moving, it seems like you're moving forward, You're just moving.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And for me, so I wasn't making much progress. It wasn't until I started, focusing, which is, as I said, this month really. And now I'm actually starting to see a lot more growth with my podcast, a lot more intentionality. And so like now that I'm doing goal setting and stuff like that for this upcoming year, it's like I'm so much more excited to see where it goes, because this is going to be the
Nice.
first year that I enter where it's like
Yes.
there's only one focus, that's it. And I'm gonna put all my energy, my creativity, my efforts into that one thing and just running with it.
I just love the idea of being able to focus. As much as we're multitaskers and we think we can do 10 things at once, I think when you can focus on that one thing and make that your mission, I think you're definitely on the right path. So I can't wait to see how that evolves for you.
Yeah, definitely. And it took a lot of clarity. I said the what really made me start realizing that it wasn't real estate was this book called The Purpose Factor. And it was, that book was dropping some heat. Like it's like one of those like hit you like a dump truck, quotes. Like, there's one quote. It said, you could be climbing the ladder of success, get to the top, and then finally realize that the ladder was up against the wrong wall. I was like, damn. Like quotes like that just make you like really think like, yeah, like that's true. Like that's a lot of people live. And there's another one that is talked about too. It was something along the lines of um a life um of like a life of accomplishments but not in alignment just leads to like a stacked resume, nothing more. And I
Okay.
was like, yeah, like I was like, damn, like it started to make me think a little bit.
Yeah,
And
yeah, yeah, yeah.
at that point, and then it was talking about your passion and stuff like that, and it was telling you how like your purpose is, your passion is the Oxford definition is a barely controllable emotion. Right. So you hear when people tell you to, pursue your passion,
Yes.
turn your
Yes.
passion into a business. You replace that with this dictionary definition. And it's like, pursue your barely controllable emotion. You make your barely
Yes.
controllable emotion into a business. It doesn't sound like too practical advice. And that book was filled with like quotes like that just makes you reshift how you think about things. And that's when I realized, okay, it's not real estate. So that's why I try to get into the social media marketing world. Right.
Right.
And then
Right.
from there, I started learning about last month in November about this concept called ikigai, right? And
Right.
it's your reason for being. And for anyone that may not know, just think of there's four circles that intersect, and at the intersection of all four circles, that's your reason for being. And the first
Nice.
circle is what you love to do, like what would you
Yep.
do if no one ever paid you. The
Yep.
second is what does the world need? What problems do you feel compelled to solve? Then third is what can you be rewarded for? Um, you know, because a lot of the times we do things and voluntarily, and you still got to pay some bills somehow, right? And then the last one is what are you good at? And that's kind of, once I started reading about that, I realized that the podcast is really it.
Yeah. Well, podcasting, it opens up so many doors and provides so many ways to connect with some brilliant people out there. And it's relatively straightforward and simple to do. And I'm a big fan of it. I have been for a very long time. And so I'm glad that you're sort of benefiting the rewards of podcasting. What was the impetus for starting one for you?
So for me, it was the idea of, as I said, one of the guys, we would talk about life and goals and stuff like that, and he suggested it. And as I said, for whatever reason, I still wanted to run with it, even though he was going back to school. And as I said, I kept writing in my goals. I couldn't think of a name, but I knew I still wanted to do it. And then the whole meaning behind the name, though, I didn't tell you that yet.
No.
It's so for the 99% of us that aren't overnight sensations, it's a walk. And some people may walk faster than others, but what good is sprinting to the finish line if you pass out when you cross it? And so that's kind of why that's how I kind of came up with the name like Walk to Wealth. And I knew like financial literacy and like building wealth is something that I think a lot of people need to learn more about. And so I was like, it kind of all came together. And I knew also that I didn't want to wait to become successful in order to finally start giving back. So I was like, well, how can I, you know, kind of share my journey, keep track of what I got going on,
Right.
but also help others while I'm literally on the journey myself, so we can come up together and walk together.
That's
And
amazing.
that's how I kind of came about, and that's why I'm still pushing strong. And then I also thought that with podcasting is one of those things where you build it and people will show up, and that wasn't the case. I was dropping weekly episodes and it wasn't growing at all whatsoever, really. And then it wasn't until I started getting intentional That this month so far is my best month. And this is the month that I've been the most intentional, which is why I'm so excited for next year. So I've
Oh
been really
man.
reaching out to, some of the people that listen and just asking them questions like, how can I help you more? Like, which episodes did you like? Which episode do you not like? And just like really getting their feedback and really, getting in touch with the people that I'm trying to help. So I know how to better help them and how to best help them.
I just think that the more you can help others and the more you can give back, it's just a wonderful thing, John. It really, really is. And it's again, I go, the piece of podcasting for me is it gives you an opportunity to share, right? Someone will be sitting here, someone out there will hear our conversation, right? And we're just shooting the breeze here, right? And someone will hear our conversation and be able to take something that can help them in their own world. And that to me is just an incredible blessing. And I hear stories all the time where someone reach out and go, hey, by the way, I like when you did this, or you talked to that person here, that guy John was great, and it's amazing. And I really think it's almost like you're fulfilling your purpose, so to speak, right? Where you're like doing, it's when you do that thing that you're meant to do. The challenge for people, maybe you have some ideas or strategies, is how do you identify to do that thing that you're meant to do if you don't know it's there?
Yeah, definitely. That's a great question. And that Ikigai exercise definitely is where I would start, honestly, right? Is get into, what you love to do. Write down the list. Like but not just love to do, like you enjoy. Like, what would you do if you never made a single dollar on a single penny? Like, what would you do for the rest of your life if you never made a single dollar from it? Right. And then that's the first step from there, and figure that out. And then once you figure that out, then it's like, all right, what are the problems the world needs solving, right? Because you could go solve climate control, or you could solve the health crisis in the US, right? The obesity crisis, or you could cure cancer. Like, but there's a ton of problems to solve. Which one do you feel compelled to solve, right? Is it a problem that you might have experienced when you were at school? Might it be bullying? Or is it something that you experience in the home, right? Could it be, a dysfunctional family unit? Or could it be, having, money situations? Is it something like wealth building, right? That's not the kind of thing that I'm doing, right? What problem are you compelled to solve? And is that in alignment with the thing that you love to do? And if that is, then you go on to the next one, right? What can you be rewarded for, right? Because let's say you start, you feel like the world needs, more Rubik's Cubes coaches, right? But are people going to pay you for that? I mean, this is a pretty small market, so I don't know how much money you're going to make from being a Rubik's Cube coach, but you could do that, right? The people want to solve Rubik's Cube, but is that something that you could make a living off of? That's another question, right? So then you have to ask that part, and from there, if it's in alignment, right, they're still somehow still working, then you go on to the fourth step, right? And that is what are you good at? But it's also, I feel like, what do you have the aptitude to be good at? Because I say, for example, like I play pickup basketball at the gym all the time, right? And there's some guys that I see all the time, and every time I get to the gym and see them, I still don't want to pick them up to they play on my team, right? Just they just haven't gotten better. Some people don't have an aptitude to be good at certain things, right? That's not a bad thing. That's just a self-awareness to know, if I don't already have a skill that's developed, which of my skills that I have can be developed. So if you're someone that have the gift of gab, you can talk your someone's head off, right? You could probably start a podcast, but it takes more than just rambling to actually make a meaningful, impactful message. But you already like talking, right? So you probably have a better aptitude to be a good public speaker than someone who's an introvert, right? So if once you get all those things and somehow they still all connect, start there, right? Start there. And then there's a amazing quote that I heard is, right, the two most important days in everyone's life are the day you were born and the day you find out why. Most people don't live to see the second, is the part I like to add to the end of that, right? And so it's like, start with that exercise, start with things you just love to do, and work your way up from there.
That's amazing. I love that quote. I've heard it before, and I agree with you. It's a powerful one, because once you understand your why, it fits your purpose, and everything flows after that. Your actions are very intentional now. You want to, the direction you're very clear what direction you're going into, and so those are all great things. And again, it starts that simple sort of like why question. Then there's nothing wrong with questioning things, right? I think sometimes people think it's perceived a certain way in a negative space, but there's absolutely nothing wrong with being accountable to ourselves, basically.
Yeah. And another like exercise that you could probably do is like just ask yourself some deep questions, like some questions that really just make you think. Like one question you could ask yourself is, you won the Powerball today, $1 billion, right? How
Yeah.
much is it? Like 1.7 or something like that. Yeah, it's a lot of money though, right? It's enough money to make you never have to work again.
That's right.
Like
That's right.
you win the Powerball, what are you doing for the rest of your life now? Because now you don't have to work. You don't have to do anything. You don't have to invest. Your money is good for the rest of your life for the most part, as long as you don't buy like a bunch
Yep.
of yachts or something. But
Yep.
what are you doing for the rest of your life? And then from there, right, you get a call. It's the doctor's office. They just read your test results. Yeah. So John, you have 5 years left. What now? You still won the lottery,
That's right.
but now you got 5 years left. What do you do now? Then it's like, oh, next day, another call. Hey John, remember the test results from yesterday? So we read them wrong, actually. You actually only have 1 day left.
Oh man.
What do you do? What's that one message
Oh
that you want
man.
if you could only serve the world one message, what would that message be? And it may change in the future, but like think about it, man. Just start thinking and reflecting. You may not have the answer, but it just gets you in the act of thinking. And then from there, you could start, getting a little bit of clarity, because most of the time we don't have time to think about things like this because we're just moving too fast, right? It's not in the front of our minds.
Yeah, no, I get it. And the speed of life, it is just that. It's go, 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 go. Um, I wonder if you should talk about the importance of mentorship and having the right people in your corner. I would imagine that, when you launched on your own, that, you had individuals that you can turn to, whether they were a formal mentor or not. But the point really is I'm making is that there is someone out there for us that can help us through any situation we're going through.
Yeah, there's two quotes I like to right. The first is, a smart man learns from his mistakes, a wise man learns from the mistakes of others. Right. And then the second quote is, the only reason I see further than most is because I'm standing on the shoulders of giants. Right. It's not me. This is not my wisdom. This is things that I kind of, you know, accumulated through talking to the people way smarter than me, way more successful than me, way further on in their journey than I am, and just being open and receptive enough to listen to these people and seek out these people. And
Yes.
then once they do talk, just soaking that in and internalizing it and trying to put that, what I can at least implement in my life. Because not everyone will tell you, for the most part, their advice from their own lens, from their own experience,
Yes.
right? And then
Yes.
you got to
Yes.
find a way to kind of mold and craft that into your life, whether that's, take out some parts and implement others. And so, like for me, one of my biggest I guess accelerators to my growth
Yep.
was this group called the Pivot Shift Group. It's a mastermind at Keller Williams, but it's not open to only Keller Williams agents. It's open to all agents. And
Yep.
even though real estate isn't my main focus, I still hop on the calls. It's every morning from 8 a.m. to 8:20, and then that call connected me with a bunch of top agents, like a bunch of people that are selling a lot of houses across the country in Canada. But it's more than just selling houses. It's like being a good person, coming from contribution, running a business, not just sticking a sign in the yard, and like all these different things in that group. And then there's a couple other spin-off groups, like the group at 6:30 to 7 a.m. that's called Early Birds Talking Real Estate. It's on Clubhouse to meet every morning, Monday through Friday. I'm not really in that group as much anymore. I mean, it's the
Right.
same people for the most part, but just because real estate is not really my focus, it's like, why would I keep on learning more real estate stuff? But I'm still on the 8 a.m. calls, and just
Nice.
to be involved,
Yeah.
involved in that community. Because although they're in real estate, that's not my main focus anymore. They're all just such amazing people. So like sometimes I talk about like more like, how to get a listing. Those calls, they kind of tune out a little bit, but like sometimes they talk about, you know, um, mindset, how do you get rid of fear? How do you, gain clarity and focus? How do you create a business plan? Things like that. So like on the more real estate days, I kind of tune out a little bit, but like then talk about like more general stuff and mindset
Yes.
stuff. And like, then that's when I'm tuning in and lock in. And I'm still on the call for the most part every morning.
But well, I think, but there's so much value in that and being able to take in lessons and use them in your own life. I mean, a comment earlier was we're not necessarily on the same path, but it doesn't mean there's something that you've gone through that I can take that use it for myself. I just think of moments of adversity as an example, right? We've all gone through something tough or something difficult or something traumatic, right? And it's what do you do to get out of that? And if it's examining the actions of others, maybe we talk to them or not, it doesn't matter, but we still have a record of their example. That could be a great starting point.
Yeah, definitely. And it's like, it's all about too, like finding, if you don't have a mentor, see what people are doing in other industries and try to figure out how to bring that into the one that you're in, right? And so like for me right now is I didn't really have any guidance as to how to really grow a podcast, right? So, but now what I'm doing is I'm taking all the different ideas I learned from real estate and being a real estate agent and trying to incorporate that to my podcast. For example, for the in-person event that I was talking about, like in real estate world, that's a client appreciation event, right? And
Right.
so I got a bunch of ideas for how to run client appreciation events. I just never done it because I was procrastinating, but I still have those ideas that I learned from other realtors. So it's like, how do I get that to do something for my podcast? How do I get something put together? I had all the ideas. I just, those were ideas for real estate. Now it's how do I incorporate that into this? Right. And so it's like finding things in other areas that are successful. For the most part, running a business or studying entrepreneurship, it's like, doesn't really matter the industry. Most of the core stuff is all the same. So it's like, if you can't find a mentor that directly in your own industry, get a little creative, seek elsewhere.
So on the topic of mentor, you had an opportunity to sit down with a billionaire.
Yeah.
Come on, that's crazy. That's
Yeah,
crazy. Tell me about that one.
So that day was really exciting because it was in June of 2020, right? There's a summit that Keller Williams hosts, and it's not for agents at all. It's for just young adults, called Quantum Leap. And that summit pretty much is Gary Keller, the founder of Keller Williams. It's pretty much, she talks about it's like a 3-day event. The first day is like, the welcoming party or whatever, welcoming dinner. Then the second day, which was a Friday, was pretty much you spend that whole day from like 8 a.m. to like 5 with Gary Keller pretty much. And then that part, it was great too because I wasn't able to afford going on the trip, but I had someone in my office who is like a Quantum Leap instructor sponsor my ticket. So, when there's a will, there's a way, right? And God always provides. So the ticket that he sponsored allowed me to have the money to book the flight to actually go. And then from there, I learned so many different things. And I think the main difference between most people and a billionaire is that the stuff that they preach and talk about, it's like so ingrained in his DNA.
Yes.
It's like all that knowledge and wisdom. It's not just like show and tell. It's like it's his genetic makeup almost. That's what it feels like. That's what it looks like. It's like that's his very essence is all that wisdom and knowledge compiled and put together through all his life. And it's like he went for, as I said, for hours and hours. He wasn't looking at a book really. He wasn't looking at it's just off his own life experiences. And it's a different level of clarity and focus and intentionality.
Yeah, and even the focus piece. I mean, if you can zero in and lock in, so much like you said for yourself, right? You're getting very focused in the new year, and you're going to make sure that you like. There's so much to be said about having that focus and being very intentional about the things that you want to do, because that way, all your actions are they're timed now. And they're relevant and they're purposeful and they're going in that step that you're trying to go to. So I've always been a fan of focus. The other thing it does, and I'll admit I struggle with sometimes, is locking out the noise, right? Like, I mean, it's hard. Like, right? Am I alone here? It's not easy.
Yeah, definitely. He has this one thing where it's like on his desk, it's like absolutely organized. There's nothing that is on his desk. It's completely neat, so he can focus on doing his one thing. And like he also talks about too, like building a bunker, right? Building a bunker of where when it's time to work and lock in, no one can enter, no one can disturb you, no one can bother you. You got to go into, when it's time to dig deep and get to work, you got to go in your bunker and just go ham and do your thing. And for that time that you're there, you're locked in, all in.
Yeah, and that's the best. Really, because the results will speak. The results, if you can get to that point, the results will always speak for themselves.
Yeah,
and that's what you're there for, right? Like, you're there for the results.
And it's not what you put in, how many hours you put in. It's what you put in the hours, right? So it's like he also talks about too. It's like win the day by noon, right? So make sure you do all the things you got to do. Usually for most people, it's some form of like prospecting. Your morning routine. You get up, do what you got to do. Maybe your meditate or goal setting, whatever your morning routine is. And then once you get down to work, you do your 20% activities and time block that in your calendar. And then make sure you get the 20% out of the way. And then from noon on, do whatever else you got to do.
Yeah, right. For sure. I don't know if we could talk a little bit about the mindset of an entrepreneur and in terms of, because again, you don't know what's coming around the corner. You don't know what, if you don't know if your idea, your business will or won't work. I wonder what important pieces or what the significance of having a healthy mindset.
Yeah, just know it's one of those things that's very different. And we're kind of being plagued right now with this thing called quiet quitting, right? And you got to remember that there's this quote, right? It's if you do more than what you're paid, eventually you'll be paid more than what you do, right? And there's, some situations where it's like you just have a bad boss or something like that, right? But it's always like if you go to entrepreneur route,
Yes.
it works every time. If you do more than what you're paid, eventually you'll be paid more than what you do. Then it's like, all right, what's the next step? Next step is if you help enough people get what they want,
Yep.
eventually you get what you want. That's Zig Ziglar, right? And so it's like just keeping those two quotes near and dear to you and grounding them. And then for me, faith as well, knowing that it will all work out in God's plan. So those kind of three things are all kind of combined together to keep me going. But I'd say the one thing that I think, and this is like a piece of mental like advice that I heard during that day with Gary Keller, the billionaire. It's called the idea like of first creation and second creation. I'm sure he didn't invent it, but he that's the first time I ever heard of it. And it's the idea that we all live two lives,
Okay.
right? The first life is in our head. It's our thoughts, right?
Yeah.
And from there, the second life is what we actually experience in the real world. And whatever we think about, wherever we identify as mentally, whatever our subconscious programming is, right? Whether like it's someone who's rich or someone that's poor, someone that struggles with money or someone that's successful, whatever your beliefs are, all that stuff is in your head. That gets lived in your head, and eventually
Yes.
that gets lived into your actual day to day, right?
Yes.
And there's one rapper said this quote. It's where I am today is an accumulation of my past thoughts. So in order to change where I want to be in the future, I have to change my thoughts now, right? And so it's like, all right, if we all live two lives, how do I change the first one so that I could live the second one, and then eventually it'll all start coming together. And there's so much more like mental stuff you can get into, but for the most part, I think with those like three or four things, like if you're getting into entrepreneurship, I think you'd be good.
Well, and there are key aspects of being able to have that success that you're after. Every entrepreneur is looking for some measure of success when they get going. And so when you can incorporate things that will help you get there, at least they're worth listening to at the very least, right?
Yeah, definitely. And it's like, I think the most important though part is the Zig Ziglar quote, right? It's like, at the very least, even if you're not the most genuine great person, you could at least, and you really don't know what you want to do, just find someone that needs help and help them with something till you figure it out what it is that you actually want to do, right?
Right. And then pay attention to your notes.
Yeah, exactly. And pay attention, right?
I love it. I love it. The idea of being bold and taking risks on this podcast, it's so important, right, John? Like, we I am certain, I am certain that there are people out there who you have motivated, who've been inspired by your actions of going out and launch something, right? And you're doing it based on what you feel you should be doing, what the desire is, to fulfill yourself, and not necessarily doing it for other people, not as motivating other people. You're doing it for yourself. But this why, for me, it's why it goes back to the importance of us being audacious, because when we're being our true audacious selves, we're inspiring people, and we may not even know it, but we're still making a difference in others. And that's why the ripple effect, because I'm through those ripple effects. And that's why it's so important that we take action, not for only ourselves, but what we do for other people who are watching.
Yeah, and your life starts to change really quickly when you start impacting people's lives. Like, I kid you not, from this past birthday that I just had, so I just turned 21 in September, and my birthday last year when I turned 20, like I think maybe like 6 or 7 people said happy birthday when I turned 20, and when I turned 21, 21 is also like a bigger year, but like even that aside, it's like the amount of people that sent me like birthday texts and birthday messages on my Facebook and on my text messages. And it's like all these people I've been able to somehow inspire or touch or connect with somehow, and or provide some bit of value in their life. Right.
Yes.
And that community I told you about, the pivot shift community, that mastermind I'm still on, like that community, it made me realize, and I never believed the quote until it happened to me, but there ain't no one that'll support you more than a stranger.
Man.
There's no one that'll support you more, not in your personal life, not in, your everyday life, unless you have maybe a significant other. That aside, just everyone else, there's no one that's going to support you like strangers. And these people, I've met most of them now in person through like conferences, but like even before went to the conferences, the way they supported and loved and um just care for one another and reach out. It's like, it's crazy. And just being in a
Yes.
community like that, where it's like, you're appreciated. You're welcome with open arms for Thanksgiving every time. And then I post a photo, thinking it's nothing. And on my Instagram, that's all my people from back home have me on IG. I post a photo on IG, gets no love. And then I post it on Facebook when I have all these realtor connections,
I mean, I
right?
love it.
And my comment section is flooded. All of them supporting me. All the people that I just met through Zoom calls and through conferences are the same people in my comments, showing love, showing support, showing everything. That's to say that no one from back home supports me. It's just
No,
the amount of
no.
people that support me that I don't know is greatly outweighs the amount of people that support me that I actually do know.
And there's truth to that, right? And I think you're right. Strangers just do. There's that when, especially when they meet us for the first time and there's something attractive or that's something that they're inspired by or they connect with. It's like they want to get, hey, what else can I do? And hey, I remember, how about this? And hey, this is great. And so and that kind of support it's good too. Again, I say with a grain of salt, we just gotta be careful how much we're listening to other people, because we don't want to let them guide us, right? We still want to we don't want to take our steering wheel of our own vehicle and give it to someone else, right? We still want to take the steering wheel and hold on to it, but maybe they kind of serve as a GPS a little bit, you know what I mean? And kind of the direction we go.
And yeah, you also got to realize too, like, for example, the other day I posted literally yesterday I posted a photo of my event for my podcast event, and a couple of people in the comments that I know from the mastermind was like, "Oh my, yeah, this is great job, John. This is definitely like you're in for an amazing real estate career." And like little do they know, it's like real estate's not even my main thing anymore, right? It's podcasting. But I mean, I didn't correct them or anything. They were still showing love, showing support. But it's like knowing that you may be, because I was known in that community as a realtor. Now it's like my main focus is a podcast. So it's like
Yeah.
a lot of people are still thinking I'm doing this stuff for real estate, and it's actually for the podcast. So it's like, they'll support you, but they're also realizing that sometimes people have this idea of what you could be, because let's say you could find success, like let's say you could be a great
Sure.
guitar player, but like you really want to get into veterinary school, right? But
Right.
you have so you go to Chase Veterinary School, right? And kind of like not give up, but you leave the guitar playing, right? And I learned this idea from this guy I interviewed named Vic Manzo. He's an amazing guest. But this idea of called non-sacrifice, right? When you're choosing to do what you love, you are never sacrificing. Sacrificing
Wow.
is a scarcity mindset. It's giving up something,
I love
right?
that. I
When
love
you're
no,
thinking
John,
of
say that
something,
again. I love that. If you choose to do what you love, you're not sacrificed. That's amazing.
yeah, when you choose to do something you love, it's non-sacrifice, right? Because you love what you do. And that when he said that to me when I was interviewing him, I was like, yo, this guy is spitting some heat. Like he was spitting some heat.
100%.
And then but he said that, and it's like right now it's like I'm at a state where I could be very successful. I know that without a doubt that I could, I wouldn't say easily, but for a very short time I could probably be one of the, especially as a solo agent, one of the top agents in that office, you know relatively easily compared to most people, right? I have the drive, I have the hunger. I'm half of everyone's age, right? I have the social media knowledge. I'm a go-getter, right? But I wasn't focused at all. And
Right.
procrastination is actually your best friend if you treat it as such, because procrastination, what it does, it gives you time to reflect. It gives you time to reflect, because I kept procrastinating all this stuff that I was supposed to do for real estate. And I started asking why. It's because when you get a call, there may be multiple phones ringing, and you might
Yes.
have picked up the wrong one. And for me, I realized I picked up the wrong phone. I wasn't supposed to be getting into real estate. I was in real estate for what it was, to teach me what I needed to teach and meet the people I needed to meet.
Yes.
Right. It's all for good reason. But it's
Yes.
like now I know I put that phone down. It's like podcasting. That's where it's at. That's the phone call I was supposed to be. Because every time I found myself distracted, it was with the podcast.
Yes.
It's a social media agency thing too. Every time I found myself distracted, it's something to do with the podcast. So it's like I keep on getting distracted with this thing. Why not just make this thing my main focus?
Right.
And then from there, I was like, let me pick up this phone and see see where it leads me to. Let me pick up this calling.
I think it's a good approach, and I love the way you identify it, like being able to identify this is what's happening, and this is what I need to be doing for myself. With all the things that you do, it's very clear that you want to help others. Like there's no doubt about that. Like as much as anyone who podcasts, they're not doing it just for themselves, right? They're doing it to help others, and I can tell you it firsthand. That's exactly it. And you want to bring value, and you want to bring to better people's lives, and encourage and motivate. Where did that come from for you?
Man, I think it was really from this quote that I heard from Plato. And my English teacher back in 12th grade, he would always go into random tangents, like off curriculum, philosophical
Right.
like classes, and totally off curriculum, but I enjoyed it nevertheless. And one of them, we were watching Plato's Allegory of the Cave. And the quote I got from there was, the duty of the enlightened is to enlighten the unenlightened. I
Mm,
don't know why, but that quote just stuck with me. It sat with me, right? And from there, it's like, as soon as I learn something, I just got to put as many people as I can on and teach them what I'm learning at the very least. And at the very least, right? You're the if you can't find your why, your purpose, your passion, whatever you want to call it, right? Your mission, it's like just leave the world a better place than when you came in. Right, at the very least, right? And you can get more specific and more, niche down from there, but it's like at the very least. And then match that up with that quote. It's like, so we're called to teach. And I interviewed another guy, and he was telling
mhm.
me too that like every person needs a mentor and
Yep.
needs to be a mentor to someone else. Right. Because no matter what we did, we got through something that someone else hasn't gotten through. And when
Absolutely.
you realize, and this is a hard thing for people to swallow, a hard pill for people to swallow, but when you realize that everything in life, including the traumatic experiences, happen for a reason, and it happens for you, right, and not to you, then you can start to experience massive growth. Because there's someone that's happening to right now that didn't make it to the other side. Right. And then it's like you explain, like, oh, all these, cruelties and evils, where that goes on, but you made it through. And there's someone that's going through it right now. So what if you were meant to go through that to help all the hundreds, thousands, millions of other people going through that same experience? Right. And it's
Mm,
weird at first to think about that, because it's like you still have to go through something terrible. It's like, but
yes.
it's for the greater good. And it's hard to kind of explain, like, oh, why do you have to go through that? And you can ask so many questions, but it's like the more you realize that there's just like certain things will never know. For example, like,
Yes.
poverty, right?
Yeah.
There were we've had tons of geniuses. You can line them up like Elon Musk,
Yeah.
Albert
Sure.
Einstein,
Sure.
Socrates, all
Yeah.
these
Really smart
brilliant minds,
people. Yep.
really smart people. Yet we're in the most prosperous time in history with the most access to information in history, and still we have this poverty, right? It's like certain things, it's like you just
Boy.
can't solve by yelling at people and pointing fingers. Like, some things you just will never understand. And it's like, then we have to ask, are we even meant to understand it?
Mm.
It's just questions, like open-ended questions that don't really have an answer, but it just makes
Yep.
you think a little bit,
Yep.
right?
Yep. Yep. No, yeah, and I think we have to challenge ourselves with those questions, right? We have to challenge and really look at things and analyze it to make sure it's almost a form of checking ourselves too, to a certain point. But we really have to analyze that and figure out why the point we're at. How did we get here? Okay, so now that we're here, we acknowledge that we're here. What do we do about it? Right. And what do
Yeah.
we do about this situation? And so being able to create something to help motivate and inspire other people can be an answer to that problem, right? It can be what that person needs. I saw someone like our own the problem that we got through can be someone else's survival guide, right?
Yeah.
Our adversity, our challenges, the things that kept us up at night, and that could be exactly what someone else needs. And so it's for that reason I've always been so big on sharing and
Yeah.
sharing our experiences, sharing our challenges, sharing our obstacles, sharing how we got through them. Because if we can do that, we can be something really, really special to other people.
Yeah, and there's an intrinsic need within all of us to connect, right? We're social beings, whether we realize it or not.
Absolutely.
No matter,
Absolutely.
how cool and cold-hearted and I don't need anyone, I don't care, I'm good on my own type of person you are. It's all a facade, man. If
Yes.
look behind the curtains deep down, it's like that's only there because they lack connection early on, right? And now they're trying to act as if they don't need it. We all need connection. We all need to be there for each other. That's how we get fulfilled, right? That's how we feel satiated in life.
I love it. I love it. I love it. Well, listen, John, I'm glad that you and I connected. I'm glad that we connected on this episode of the podcast. I really appreciate the good stuff that you've been sharing because it's needed. And I also want to commend you for doing what you're doing, not just sharing on this podcast, but sharing in general and to your network and trying to make this world a better place. I think we all have an obligation to as you said earlier, to leave this world better than we found it. And if everyone was doing their part or doing half of what you're doing, man, this would be an awesome place.
Yeah, definitely. I'll leave you with this, right? So if you know 100 people,
okay,
and they know 100 people, right? And they know 100 people, and they know 100 people, and they know 100 people. You're what is that? 5 or 6 connection away from 1 billion people. You can make an impact far bigger than you realize once you start thinking like that. So it's like if you aren't doing the best to strive to reach your fullest potential, think of all the billions of people that you're letting down. And if that doesn't compel you to act today, don't really know what will. So that's what I'll leave you with today.
Very cool. Very cool. Listen, thank you for that. For our listeners that want to connect with you, check out your podcast or learn more about your work. Where could we send them?
Yeah, so my podcast is Walk to Wealth on everything. And I actually created, the Audacious Living, right? Entrepreneurship is something that takes a lot of courage. Yes. And so I created this free training called the Beginner's Guide to Entrepreneurship. And it's pretty much the 4 businesses you should start before starting your dream business. A lot of time we get this calling, we get this passion, and then you get straight into starting a side hustle or starting our business, and we have no business experience because we didn't learn that in school, right? And we screw it over, and we think it's because our dream or our mission it was a bad idea. Right? Actually, no, you just missed some skills that you probably needed. So go check out that training. I'll send it to Adley so you can put it in the links.
That would be awesome. I wouldn't mind checking out myself, man. Maybe there's a piece, something that I'm missing that I need to add to my wheelhouse, man. Who knows? So listen, this has been, John, very, very cool. I'm so glad that we connected. We'll stay connected. I love the work you're doing. I love the energy. I love the passion, wanting to make a difference. All of these things are wonderful things and should be commended. So congratulations. Thank you. And be well, my friend.
Thank you. And thank you to you as well.
Awesome. Back, we are here on the podcast, and I want to send my appreciation and thanks to John for stopping by and hanging out and being here and sharing some insights again into the fantastic work. I really appreciated hearing about his own personal journey and the self-improvement work that he's done to get to the point where he's at now. And really, it's about getting to that better place. And there's no question that he's done that. And definitely, John, you are all about disrupting the norm, and I encourage you to keep up the great work. Remember to check out his podcast, Walk to Wealth, for all sorts of tips on wealth management and investments and real estate and all that good stuff. So definitely check out his podcast. We'll make sure the link is in the show notes. You know, when I think back to my conversation with John, I really appreciated so much of what he had to say. But if there's just one thing that I would take from my chat, it would be this. We all want to live a life of happiness and love that uniquely belongs to us. And while that path may not entirely be clear, the journey is our own. You know, there's a false belief that you have to do the things the same way as everyone else does to find success in life. Whether it's thinking that they've got to go to the same good school or get the same good job or settle down and have a family and live their life the same way like everyone else is. But that simply isn't the case. You can make your life whatever you want it to be, and it doesn't have to mirror anyone else's. When you start your own journey of creating your own path in life, you might feel lost and you might be uncertain, unsure where to go. But you may even not know what you want to create, but you do know that you want something else. The first thing to remember is that you will not find your way by scanning the distant horizon or of the future or comparing yourself to others. You need to really start walking. Settle on your journey, your way, step by step, and keep your eyes peeled for any opportunities that appear. Try to identify your passions and try to spend more time on the things that are meaningful to you. These are the steps needed to live your own audacious life. Hey, listen, if you haven't registered for email notifications of the podcast, please know that you can do so simply by heading over to bestaudaciouslife.com, and all you've got to do is enter in your email address and you'll be alerted every time there's brand new content that comes out. We've reached the end of another edition of the Audacious Living Podcast, and I send my thanks and appreciation out to our audacious listeners and those lovers of audaciousness. Your support is tremendous, and I really, really appreciate it. Until next time, stay safe, be kind, show love to one another, and be audacious.
You've been listening to the Audacious Living Podcast, hosted by Audley Stevenson. If you enjoyed what you heard, be sure to like, subscribe, and share. Until next time, be audacious.